Hey neighbor, how's it going? Are you selling well? Living up to the hype? All that good stuff? If not, well then watch your back, because this week's SOS is all about albums with massive hype and commercial expectations that somehow flopped on arrival. There's 100 reasons for why an album from a proven star could fall way short of expectations, and it's not my intention to act like some sort of obsessed fan taunting the artist for flopping. In fact, some of these wouldn't even get called a flop at all if they were made by somebody else. If you enjoyed the video, then please drop a like, subscribe if you're new in town, and check out the 7 on Sunday playlist linked in the description for more episodes just like this.
Waste away tonight, my heart's on the list.
2 back-to-back rock opera concept albums reignited Green Day's mainstream success as they dominated the 2000s rock scene and then some. But the come down after the high felt like a step backwards as the trio unveiled a 3-album project, Uno, Dos, and Tre, aka the Trilogy. Their previous record, 21st Century Breakdown, sold over 200,000 copies in its first 3 days alone, and it was certified gold within a month for sales over 500K, meaning commercial expectations were huge for the follow-up. The boys were touting a serious back-to-basics mentality as they started promoting the Trilogy, but thanks to the underwhelming lead single Oh Love, paired with the uncomfortable truth that Green Day's frontman Billie Joe Armstrong had broken his sobriety, doubt crept its way in. Unconventional releases are always a gamble, but this rollout felt like a tightrope walk. Singles for Tre were landing before Dos was out, the music videos felt very low effort, and the project showed signs of failure before Uno even saw the light of day in September 2012. The singles didn't perform all that well, even at alternative and rock radio, leading to a decrease in chart performance each time, with the album Uno at 139K, Dos at a very appropriate 69K, and Tre limping in with just 58K sales week 1. Following a meltdown at iHeartRadio Festival in Las Vegas, the writing was on the wall. Green Day had officially overworked themselves on what was supposed to be a fun outing. The Trilogy is unfortunately remembered as a commercial and critical failure, although I'd have to call you crazy if you think there's not any good songs sandwiched somewhere in the 37 tracks that made up Uno, Dos, and Tre.
She said, would you be my sister? Sister.
Fleetwood Mac touched the hand of God with the 1977 classic Rumours, an album that eventually sold more than 30 million units across the globe. They were never gonna top those numbers, and I think that's a good thing for them artistically that they didn't, because the follow-up album Tusk is really special. Record label execs are like hungry sharks thrashing about wildly when they catch a whiff of blood. Any artist with a major breakthrough is expected to keep that momentum soaring, but what they fail to understand about albums like Tusk and countless others is that no true artist is comfortable just repeating themselves for the sake of your bottom line. It's not like no one bought the record, it did sell millions of copies, but only around 4 million, which, as crazy as that sounds, looked like a big fat failure to the label given the insane sales of Rumours and the amount of cash they had fronted for production. Double albums are really expensive to produce, and whose idea was it to make one? None other than band staple Lindsey Buckingham, who unfortunately took the slow sales blame square on the nose since this album was most definitely Buckingham's baby. Pushing against the grain wasn't a bad thing, as Tusk is a really good record full of life, variety, emotion. All 3 of their vocalists have plenty of their own tracks to shine, with some fantastic instrumentation to complete the puzzle, so don't look at the album's lack of popularity and see this as a roadblock to you getting into a record that is a beautiful turning point in a legendary band's discography.
Cause she loves danger, psychopath, and you don't fuck with no man's girl, even I know that. But she's devised some plan to stab him in the back.
Revival didn't go viral. Hey, let's keep it real. Eminem is one of the greatest rappers of all time. You know it, I know it, maybe you don't want to admit it, but you still know it. Greatness comes at a cost, and like many aging rappers, the hunger you had early on gets lost once life settles down, which is definitely natural, but the problem surrounding Revival goes way deeper than age, as M practically swallows himself whole. It was M's first record in 4 years, but the buzz around his comeback proved to be all talk, as Revival went on to sell just over 250,000 copies in its first first week, compared to the almost 800K performance of the Marshall Mathers LP too. This time felt different, like one of the greats of all time was struggling to stay relevant while also attempting to blend very personal elements on tracks such as Castle or Walk on Water, and when you cross-examine the project's constant state of flux, it's not surprising that fans were confused by the drastic variations in tone. Kamikaze dropped less than a year later and almost doubled the first week numbers of Revival at 434,000. That accomplishment made it crystal clear what the fence-sitters wanted from the Detroit rapper, and it wasn't some overcooked off-brand nasty pizza. They needed to hear some fiery rage-spitting bars straight from the oven, and when they got that, Revival quickly faded into the rear view. How Axl Rose managed to stall for an entire decade while he desperately tossed together a 70-minute album without any of the original members of Guns N' Roses other than himself and longtime keyboard player Dizzy Reed is almost impressive. Almost! By the mid-90s, their legendary members Slash and Duff McKagan dipped out because of Axl's overwhelming assholery, leading the spiraling frontman to announce Chinese Democracy as the next album title in 1999, a full decade before it was finally released. Geffen Records publicly feuded with Axl over the album's alarming production costs, leaving Mr. Rose to take a lot of the money out of his own pocket, with the final production cost estimated to be around $13 million, making it the most expensive album never made, as many joked. That is until our white whale was captured by Captain Ahab, with Chinese Democracy officially releasing November 23rd, 2008. Chart analysts from the likes of Billboard estimated first week sales would be around 800,000, leading electronic retailer Best Buy to make a really stupid move by pre-purchasing more than 1 million copies of an album that sank far below the forecast with just over 250,000 units sold week one. Hey, welcome to Best Buy! Would you like to purchase 15 copies of Chinese Democracy? Most people didn't believe this album even existed, and many straight up didn't care, since you-know-who were completely absent from album 6. 15 years went by, people's tastes changed, and even with the whole free Dr. Pepper for everyone in the US gimmick and the insane media blitz promoting the album, the appetite for new Guns N' Roses was undeniably low. When the King of Pop was ready to drop, people of the 80s and 90s expected a worldwide phenomenon, so why would the 2000s be any different? Invincible was the crowning of a new decade, as it was Michael Jackson's first new album in 6 years. So how is it that it became his lowest seller since Forever Michael all the way back in 1975? No one was prepared for that steep of a fall off. Not to say that 300K copies in a week is bad, but it only racked up double platinum status stateside compared to his previous 5 records, which all sold more than 8 million easily. Sony Music were understandably panicked after investing $25 million into Invincible's never-ending production cycle. For the sake of comparison, let's look back to Thriller. It's the best-selling album of all time, yet its budget only clocked in at just over $750,000, so for Sony, they're probably shitting bricks thinking about who's gonna get fired and how much they're gonna lose over this unexpected tanking. Reviews at the time were ruthless. They went straight for the throat, and many labeled it as the worst Michael Jackson album. The singer's increasingly erratic behavior didn't help either, and even though I think this is actually a pretty fun, ahead-of-its-time dance pop album, it's understandable why the bloated runtime and shifty electronics didn't connect in the way that his best R&B blockbusters did. I happen to believe in a thing called luck, so ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the world of a band called The Darkness. Hard-rocking antics were all but extinct by the turn of the century, so The Darkness took it upon themselves to dial the tongue-in-cheek masculinity to 11 by unleashing a raucous live show and a hyper-fun debut album, Permission to Land. That 2000 record blew the hell up in the UK, selling more than 1.5 million copies there, and even charting inside the top 40 in the States. Obviously, the band, their fans, and the label took this as a very good sign. It looked like outer space was the limit, so why not fire away on the rocket boosters and, I don't know, fuck around and toss a $1 million production budget at album 2? Well, I can think of more than one reason as to why that's not a good idea. Partially because the band were falling apart behind the scenes, with their singer Justin Hawkins battling some pretty intense addictions, and also because one album isn't enough to prove that you aren't just a in one ear, out the other flash in the pan. Everything about the release of One Way Ticket to Hell and Back went off the rails and off the rails fast. Delays were constant, the full album leaked online a month ahead of schedule, the reviews called them out for a massive lack of creativity, and the charming brand of humor they once nailed seemed a lot more rusty and juvenile here. I don't think One Way Ticket is unforgivably bad, but it definitely doesn't sound like $1 million. I guess a lot of other people felt the same way, considering Permission to Land had topped the album charts and went 4 times platinum, while LP2 drunkenly staggered in for an 8th place finish, bombing in the sales department, and barely even receiving a gold certification for sales of 100,000 in their homeland.
I just want it to be hot because I'm best when I'm in love and I'm in love.
Lady Gaga was unstoppable at the turn of the 2010s, almost immediately cementing her place as one of the biggest pop stars ever with 2 huge albums, The Fame and Born This Way. I was on the front lines listening and bopping my head off to her countless hits that annihilated the charts between 2008 to 2012, so color me and the rest of the world surprised when the classically trained singer dropped the introspective dissection of celebrity Applause as the lead single from her 3rd album. ARTPOP was a visionary collective born in the trenches of desperation, as Gaga herself unfortunately now views the era as more of a missed connection, a dropping of the metaphorical ball plagued by the lack of control in her life as the star struggled with self-worth, physical pain, and buried trauma from her past. Don't get it twisted, I loved ARTPOP then, and I love ARTPOP now. It's just that the album itself failed to connect with the masses for maybe a myriad of reasons, but my biggest argument would be that it's probably a little bit too aggressive, borderline nihilistic in its tone, and it flirts pretty heavily with that in-your-face EDM. Artistic evolution brought forward a side of Stefani Germanotta that the world hadn't seen yet. So when the album sold a lukewarm 258,000 against the 1.1 million Born This Way delivered a mere 2 years prior, how could she not take that landslide personally and assume that fans really didn't care all that much about the world she built? Cheers to you for watching and for liking, my neighbor. I appreciate the support as always, and if you haven't subscribed yet and you're new, do the deed and turn on those notifications too. Hit the comments with your take on any of these Blockbuster album flops, along with anything that you'd add if I do a part 2, and check out more of 7 on Sunday by tapping the cards below me. You can follow me on Instagram at ARTVJohn, and I'll see you soon for more on ARTV.